Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So,
One Piece chapter 1101 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. One of my big criticisms for society itself, yeah, we're starting the review like that, is, look, we are saturated with entertainment. And the end result of this is that there is so much for us to read, watch, do, whatever, that everything has to be balls to the wall all the time. I guess it doesn't have to be, but when it comes to highly commercialized things, right, it usually is because you are trying to appeal to the most people possible, and going too slow risks losing people's attention. Straight up. And yeah, I'm calling out you people that watch all of my videos at 2x speed. I know, I see. But I always felt like one of the strengths of One Piece, particularly early on, is, you know, it's not the fastest story ever. You have time as you read it to sort of stop and smell the roses. And I think that ultimately this creates an appeal that a lot of stories that I see now kind of miss. And if you're patient, spending more time with characters isn't a bad thing. I think that most One Piece fans will tell you over 1,000 chapters following Luffy and hundreds of chapters for every member of his crew, it creates a bond just from the time spent together with us fans, if you were patient and didn't rush ahead or skip Skypiea. So kind of the same as my feeling after the last chapter, this chapter of Kuma's flashback did not seem really all that necessary. Yes, we're filling in some of the blanks of Bonnie's journey, her character, right? These are unanswered questions, but Oda has, especially at the end of Wano, right, a tendency to address some of these in like SBS's or Vivre cards or some source outside of the manga and just move on with his life. Did he have to reveal Zoro's lineage and the country of Wano in the manga? No, he didn't have to. And ultimately, he didn't. Like, if you had a word count that you had to follow no matter what, it could have been cut, and nothing consequential, essential is lost. The story still works without it. But just because you can write your story without it doesn't mean that it's necessarily better for it. That's kind of why I brought up the Zoro lineage example, because that's one thing that I think, had it been included and tied into the end of Wano in some respect, I think the majority of the fans would have appreciated that and enjoyed that. And it might have elevated their experience at the end of Wano, even though it was non-essential and essentially cut. But yeah, I only bring this up because it seems relevant to this chapter. This chapter I felt like was actually really short. I wanted a little bit more of it, to be honest with you, but at the same time I recognize that nothing crazy happened here, and this is just straight up a chapter that could have been cut. And I'm glad that it wasn't. Honestly, I think that with the entire flashback, Oda has been pretty meticulous and thorough. Like, he seriously made sure to include every possible detail that he could have related to Kuma and Bonnie's story. But this chapter was definitely different from every other chapter that we've gotten so far. It's the one where you can definitively say that Bonnie is the MC here. She is the main character. And I think that it makes the flashback a little bit more complete. Not just for filling in the gaps of the things that happened in their past, but also for the fact that Bonnie is an important character in Egghead too. And Oda made sure to treat her that way. I think that one of the things that this chapter put into perspective for me is, you know, we've obviously been living in this alternate universe where Bonnie is a full-ass adult, right? Like, she is fully grown up, and that's just been the perception of her. And only recently has that changed, the reveal, for sure, even though we speculated this ahead of time, right? But like, it's different when you know for sure she is in fact a child. But even after that reveal, it took until this chapter for me just for it to settle in my brain that, look, everything that she has accomplished as a child, which is wild. And it's not like she has some OP pirate crew around her to carry her. I mean, they're literally fishermen. They're like dudes that were hanging out in Sorbet. I mean, I suppose that they're given a little bit more credit than that in the chapter, but still, I can't help but imagining them as just literally fishermen. So Jewelry Bonnie, as a 10-year-old, took random people from her island and ended up becoming one of the Supernova pirate crews. That is just, I mean, just try to make sense of it. Okay, you can't. Bonnie is like literally Pirate King level. She's just a child. She hasn't reached that timeline yet, but she will. Like, think about this for a moment, okay? Jewelry Bonnie, as a 10-year-old, low diffs Luffy, easy. I mean, it's not even close, right? Bonnie as a 10-year-old, Luffy as a 10-year-old, not even close. Now granted, she has a devil fruit, okay? And the devil fruit is pretty freaking strong. It has some AoE effects, right, where she can make everyone old or young, and You know, that's pretty powerful. She also has demonstrated, also in the chapter as well, the distorted future, the Nika ability, which makes herself strong. Plus, she can age herself, so she's technically an adult in, like, body. But you still gotta train, you know, have some respect there, right? It's not just about being old. There's a lot of weak old people or weak in their prime people. You know, she's got something, like there's some DNA in there that's worthy of contemplating. I'm just saying, Pirate King level. In like 10 or so years. But no, jokes aside, I just am really impressed with Bonnie. Obviously, we got to meet her mother, Ginny, in this flashback, and Ginny herself was very impressive from a young age, and it's just clear that Bonnie inherited some of those traits. Like, think back to Sabaody and Bonnie's quick reaction to Zoro attempting to assassinate a celestial dragon. Her scheme there, I mean, that is pretty impressive for such a young person. And to survive on the Grand Line, obviously, she had to be cunning. And clearly she is. But yeah, I don't really believe that Bonnie is Pirate King level. I just said that in jest. But it's an interesting conversation to have, right? Because, like, this chapter is very similar to the last one with Kuma. Kuma went on his little pirate adventure as a Joy Boy candidate, somebody who reflects aspects of Joy Boy. And you can see sort of what his One Piece was, the treasure at the end of the seas, right? And so that's what this chapter was for Bonnie. The treasure at the end of the seas. She's just beginning it here. This is her little pirate adventure. She was also compared to Joy Boy, just the same as Kuma. Her treasure at the end of the seas is Kuma, her dad. The reality is that once she finds her treasure, she will probably be satisfied and never reach what potential she could have had. I think that ambition is a big concept in One Piece, and the one destined to become the king of the pirates is the person with the most ambition, which is Luffy. Just what he dreams for. It's just so out there and so large that it can't be comprehended. Whereas, you know, you can obviously comprehend what Bonnie is wanting. I mean, it's very human. But yeah, overall, I just feel like a lot of what happened in this chapter is very artful, you know? It's more the themes of the story and what the characters represent matter. Over the last several chapters, we've obviously talked a lot about Kuma representing Joy Boy, and I've told you that you can probably take elements of Kuma's story and apply it to the actual Joy Boy, the actual Nika, who lived during the Void Century, and we will likely find similarities when we get that story for sure. And what happened in this chapter, man? Kuma is writing letters about his adventure that don't reach their destination. Kuma, as Joy Boy, is writing his poneglyphs. They are just destructible. And the story therefore justifies the reason why the poneglyphs needed to be indestructible, because if they had fallen into the hands of the enemy, they would have been destroyed just the same as Kuma's letters to Bonnie. But Kuma represents Joy Boy, but Bonnie represents Joy Boy too. Just the same as there was a Joy Boy in the Void Century and we have Luffy today. Bonnie is like Luffy today, symbolically. It's just the same as Odin as a near Joy Boy-like figure. Odin was this impressive figure, right? But ultimately he failed, and what does he do? He tells everybody that there's going to be somebody who is going to accomplish this unfinished task in the future. Odin as Joy Boy is waiting for the reappearance of Joy Boy in a different form, this time Luffy. I hope that this thought is comprehensible, right? Sometimes you never know, okay? But yeah, so the same sort of concept applies between Kuma and Bonnie. Oda is heavily paralleling Joy Boy's story with Kuma and Bonnie, not just with them, other places as well. We'll have a video talking about this sometime soon, I swear. But I think a good way to conceptualize it is that Kuma is Joy Boy and Bonnie is those with the initial D. You know, maybe not Joy Boy's actual children, but spiritually his children, carrying his will. Seems likely to me. But it's also inverted in an intriguing way. With Joy Boy, the only way that anyone can actually know that he exists is by following the poneglyphs that he left scattered across the world. With Jewelry Bonnie, right, these poneglyphs, these letters, never actually reached her. And that's really curious because Kuma as Joy Boy, his actual desire, if he had ever recorded it for anyone to read, was for Bonnie to be happy and safe. I think that had Bonnie known his actual desire, had he communicated more fully to her what he wanted, it would have prevented her adventure. Kind of like how Oda has said about mothers as the antithesis of adventure. In this we get something similar to that, as like a child is a parent's weak spot. It just sort of communicates that a parent's desire for their child to be safe, it kind of doesn't work in creating, you know, somebody who's going to change the world and cause mayhem. So it almost seems important to me that the children of Joy Boy, those that hold the initial D, don't actually know anything about him, right? Like Dragon and Luffy, there's a barrier that can't be crossed. And there are those like Luffy who are actively pursuing what Joy Boy's interests and dreams and adventures were, they just don't know it. In a similar but more literal way, Bonnie's adventure leads her to the story of Kuma's life, which we have just seen recently in Egghead as she took in Kuma's memories. In my opinion, something very similar to this is absolutely going to happen with Luffy. As Luffy reaches Laugh Tale, he's on the Poneglyphs, the Rio Poneglyph. You put them all together, what you'll get is Joy Boy's memories, basically. The story of his life. And then suddenly everything will make sense. And I think that it might have a similar effect as to what Kuma's memories might have for Bonnie. Bonnie now knows everything that Kuma did and why he did it, but it probably leaves her with a predicament. Kuma literally sacrificed everything so that Bonnie could be free. Getting revenge for him is definitely not what he would have wanted. And while Kuma might have some musings about a better world or a way for Bonnie to really be safe with the world as it is, it's unlikely that he had any legitimate answers. He just possessed knowledge and experience. Maybe this conversation is way too far out there for a lot of people, but I find all of this to be really interesting, and I'm sure that this is just one of those things that when we get to the end of the story and we reread it, it's going to hit maybe a little bit differently. It's a kind of story that is enjoyable in the now, but is incredible on reread, I think. But I suppose there's more to convey, right? Because with Bonnie's story, an important character in all of this is, you know, your world government, right? She is being babysat by members of Cypherpol, which do a lot of really stupid things out of almost like sheer viciousness and cruelty. Similar to Joy Boy's Poneglyphs, the world government doesn't think that it is safe, it is acceptable for Kuma's child to read about his adventures and maybe be inspired by him. But in like the same damn way, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, their actions just inspire Bonnie to set out to the sea probably sooner than she would have otherwise, because they allowed it to become a mystery to pursue. Do you guys see how that is precisely what the world government has accomplished by creating the Void Century, the Void history? The fact that there is something that people cannot have makes it something to pursue and investigate. The knowledge of not knowingness is itself a driver of adventure, which is great irony. But yeah, the chapter also had just a moment of kind of sadness, right? Just from Kuma's perspective of writing all of these letters, heartfelt, like he just wanted Bonnie to have a moment with him, and he couldn't share that with her, so he wanted to convey it through letters, which ultimately she never received. I found myself glad in the chapter itself that Kuma did not know that. But retrospectively, it makes the moment in Egghead where Bonnie was able to connect with Kuma's memories all the more powerful. You know, when that moment actually happened in the story, I didn't feel anything other than curiosity. But now we know the context of it. And it's, you know, even within Egghead itself, man, like now that I know this, rereading that moment just means so much more. After all this time, the letters have been received. Also, I just want to make sure this is said and we don't forget, Connie is MVP here. Like, what an amazing old lady. What an incredible badass she must have been when she was younger, and I almost want that story too. But yeah, I feel like we've aimlessly rambled through this review. I honestly don't have too much to say. I really enjoyed the chapter. The moment at the end where, you know, the teachings about Nika allowed, empowered Bonnie is like the whole point of the Nika mythological figure, right? Just taking a more tangible form. That story inspired Kuma his entire life to, in a way, surpass his limits, become the greatest version of himself. And although Bonnie used her double fruit, I mean, the story did the same for her. And I think philosophically and spiritually, there's a lot that can be said about that in terms of religious figures. But I think that getting out of the realm of abstractness, right, is just the more real question of, like, you know, what's next? And I think that, you know, eventually we have to get back to Egghead, but I'm tired of speculating when that will be, because Oda is just having a blast, it seems like. I feel like we have one or two options here. You know, the first option is that Bonnie sets out to the sea, and, we basically catch up to everything that we actually know. Bonnie learns about what has occurred to her father watching the snails, the video snails, from Marineford. So basically, she never encounters Kuma ever as a pirate. And this entire time, she's been pursuing Vegapunk in the New World, which has only recently been accomplished. Or maybe Oda finds more story to tell. Maybe Bonnie does track down some clues as to the fate of her father before Marineford, and we get in some aspect of that story, maybe an encounter with a Kainu, something to that effect. And maybe that's what we get in the next chapter, or at the beginning of the next chapter at the very least. But obviously we will see. And I am in full wait and see mode. But as always, guys, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comment section below. This weekend, I will probably be streaming for the first time in years. We're going to be opening some One Piece TCG cards, just chit-chatting. It's going to be a low-effort stream, okay? The link for that will be up in the next couple days or so, but I'm just preparing you guys, so if you're not doing anything on Saturday, feel free to hop in and pray for some hype pulls. But yeah, as always, feel free to check out my books, The Booms, links in the description. Like, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.